Hey everyone, today we are going to do a spirit message through Noah Levine's Dharma Punx. We'll go ahead and grab a couple dice to get our page. That one really wanted to come out. And these numbers may have significance for you too as well, for confirmation. Spirit, what advice do you have for the collective at this time? For whomever it'll resonate for, whenever the time is divine. Thank you. We have number 10. Okay, and we have number 12. And already 103 is calling me. So that may be significant to you. All right. Here we go. All right, this is from the chapter named Who Killed Bambi? Chapter 13. Okay. See if we can do the whole. No, it's a bit long. All right. Do a couple pages. I always had some dilemma or question that I was struggling with, and Matthew's gentle acceptance and loving encouragement to deeply explore all of these questions was exactly what I needed. It was so unlike any relationship that I had ever experienced. He was much more than a sponsor or a friend. He was truly my teacher. After I had been studying with him for several months, he became very adamant about the danger of sexuality for the serious spiritual aspirant. I had heard that he had lost his sexual desire years earlier, after some intense spiritual experience or something. I didn't know all the details, but I heard that he had just gotten so spiritual that he could no longer connect with his wife in a sexual way. By the time I came around, they were already divorced. I guess she had left him. No sex equaled no marriage. Yet there he was, suggesting the same thing to me. I began to consider what the celibate life would be like. Sex was definitely something that I really was attached to. I felt like I was just discovering my sexuality, and now this guy was telling me that if I really wanted to be spiritual, I should consider abandoning my sexual desire, or at least my sexual practices. He suggested that in the beginning I should either stop or at least cut down on masturbation. He felt that masturbation was especially unskillful because it not only increased the sexual appetite, but was also a form of mental rape. He explained that when one fantasizes about others without their consent, it is like sexually taking them against their will. I wasn't sure what to make of all of that, but I was really willing to do whatever was suggested if it was going to help me find more understanding and peace. It did fit in with what I was studying in the Buddhist and Hindu teachings. The Buddha was celibate, and so were a lot of the Hindu gurus and yogis, so I took a 30-day vow not to masturbate. I was still dating a lot and having sex quite often, so the no jacking off thing wasn't all that difficult. After the first 30 days, it seemed to be going pretty well, so I decided to continue with abstaining from masturbation. I was still being pretty promiscuous, though, even as I had started to become more aware of how my actions affected others. I was also beginning to see that my spiritual practice did suffer when I was spending all of my time either chasing girls or having sex. If there was someone else in my bed, I usually didn't do my morning and evening prayer and meditation. I still wasn't comfortable enough to do it in front of other people. I was still somewhat in the closet spiritually. I thought that being spiritual was uncool, that it wasn't punk to pray and meditate. Yet I was really beginning to experience a sense of peace that I had never known before. 3 months after my vow of abstinence from masturbation, I decided to take a vow of complete celibacy. The girl I was dating at the time was not too happy about it, but I was really motivated to progress on the spiritual path. Matthew was very pleased and totally supportive of my decision to give up sex in order to go deeper into my spiritual practice. I was continuing to study the Eastern systems of spiritual awakening and attending Buddhist meditation groups and Hindu gatherings. But Matthew was my main teacher. We would sit on the porch of his house and discuss the Bhagavad Gita and Advaita Vedanta, or Buddha Dharma. He had studied much of what I was studying, but his awakening did not fall under the guise of any particular paradigm or spiritual philosophy. We spoke a lot of God and ultimate reality, but our relationship was a simple one, and it was mostly consisted of meditating together. A couple of times when we were sitting in his living room looking out over the mountains and ocean, I was inevitably asking some esoteric question about the ultimate nature of reality. Instead of answering my question, he would go into a sort of a trance and then place his hand on my chest right in the center over the solar plexus. What happened is hard to explain. It felt like he was infusing me with his wisdom or some kind of energy. I had read about Shakti and Kundalini, so I guess I just figured that that was what was happening. But the experience was a little like heroin. A warm rush filled my whole body, and whatever question I had seemed answered not in words but experience experientiality. I wasn't sure what to make of it. Was it magic? Was he really enlightened and this was one of his spiritual powers? I knew that the Buddha was said to have a lot of magical powers, so it seemed like it made sense. I didn't talk about those experiences much. They felt too scared, and I wasn't sure if anyone would believe me anyway, so I just kept them to myself. My life had been truly transformed in those first couple of years of serious spiritual practice. Many of my negative and destructive behaviors, such as stealing, lying, and all forms of physical violence, began to fall away. The more I practiced kindness and humility, the more the world seemed to appear friendly and manageable. I was sponsoring a bunch of guys in recovery and volunteering at hospice on my days off from work. An incredible willingness to help others was suddenly present in my life. Being celibate allowed me to spend my time doing spiritual practice rather than looking for love. It was truly incredible to me that I was able to resist temptation. At times it seemed that women would come on to me just because they knew I was celibate. Hold on a sec, guys. Skip the page. There we go. The practice of celibacy alone was opening me up to a deeper sense of the way the mind-body connection works. I saw over and over that my mind and body could be filled with desire, and that no matter how intense the craving was, it would always pass. I didn't have to satisfy every desire that arose in my mind. I began to understand impermanence through direct experience rather than just intellectual theory. This was the first time in my life that I began to question my identification with punk rock. I was so deeply engrossed in the beginning stages of spiritual practice that I thought that the negative vibe of hardcore punk rock would bring me down. I had always loved punk because it was an outlet for my anger, but now I had a new outlet, and it seemed to be working better than punk ever had. Within the punk rock scene, there were other kids getting spiritual too. There were even some hardcore bands like Shelter and 108 that were preaching Krishna consciousness. I also started trying to get into other forms of music like jazz, soul, and reggae. But although I thought some of it was cool, nothing ever moved me the way punk did. I continued to listen to punk and rap and still went to shows, but as my perspective on life began to change, so did my resonance with some of the negativity and violence in the hardcore scene. I even started listening to some of Matthew's music, which was way too mellow, but since I appreciated him so much, I even started to like his records. Matthew knew I was into punk, but we never talked about music. He was always giving me CDs out of his music to listen to. It was okay if you were just hanging out or meditating, but not something you wanted to blast in your car. As I began to identify more with the Krishna core scene, I realized that some other kids were into it also, like my friends Joe and Russ. Even with the punk scene, I had found a place where it was cool to be spiritual. I'll leave it there, guys. Have a good one.